I'd like to do a recap of the Contender series. This was episode 5. So I think there's 10 weeks. I think that we're at the halfway point now. And a lot of the best action is on the Contender series. It's very exciting. You never have a week that's really not exciting in the Contender because there's such high stakes for all these fighters. Whereas for the UFC, of course, there's high stakes, but sometimes you have better fights, sometimes you have worse fights. But with the Contender series, there's always that level of intrigue. And what you had tonight is I actually found myself agreeing with a lot of things that Dana did and the contracts that he didn't give out. In the first fight, you had this girl, Nicole Cagliari, defeated a girl, Lafram Bose. Sounds like a French name. I believe she was from Canada. And the story going into the fight was that Lafram Bose had been scheduled to fight on the Contender Series in the previous season, but she found out from a routine doctor's exam that she was actually 3 months pregnant. So obviously, good thing that she found that out. She didn't end up fighting on the Contender, but then she comes back a year later, and she was 35 years old when she just fought. She's 35 years old right now, so it's like, well, what's really going to happen here? And then the fight started, and it just looked like the two of them were levels below where they needed to be. They were both like just rushing in with their chins up high, and the punches looked weak and pathetic. It really didn't look like a very good fight. And then Cagliari gets an armbar and wins it, and Dana came out after the fight and said, "I'm just going to attribute the beginning of the fight to nerves. You won by armbar, so you're going to get the contract. It was a first-round finish, so I'm going to give you a shot in the UFC." And I think that's really the way I saw it as well, because he wasn't too enamored with her. He didn't think she was really that great. He said that the fight wasn't good. He said he's just going to attribute it to nerves. And despite the fact that it wasn't a great fight, he said, okay, look, you got the first-round finish, so I'm going to give you the contract, and we're going to give you a chance in the UFC. But he was not overly hyped about this one, and Cagliari just has to. She has an opportunity where if she comes out in her next one in the UFC, then she has an opportunity to erase the weirdness and the bad fight that this looked to be, and the low level that she looked to be up until she got that armbar. Then you had a very interesting fight. You had this guy Josias Musasa, a guy from the Congo, beating this guy Tanzalovi by split decision. Now, Tanzalovi, Dana thought won the fight. I also thought Tanzalovi won the fight. But Dana also said he was more interested in Musasa. I was also more interested in Musasa because the guy was going out there doing strange things. He was not getting up in classic ways, but he was never on the ground for more than a couple of seconds. He got up every single time. It didn't look like he necessarily had all the skills, but he really did sort of remind me a bit of Kamaru Usman in the way that he fights, because Kamaru doesn't use jiu-jitsu too much in the cage. He doesn't usually get submissions. Most of his fights, up until he knocked out Jorge Masvidal, were, and yeah, he had one other finish, I believe, in the UFC that was kind of like him stamping himself as a higher level fighter. But Kamaru had really, really good hips, and this guy has really good hips, and it's super hard to take him down. If he goes down, he gets right back up. So the differences between him and Usman are that, well, he's lighter. So Usman fought at 170. This guy was fighting at 135. But in terms of build, they were very similar, and they're from a similar part of the world. They're from the same place. Or maybe not the same city, but they're from the same country. And the guy has the gas tank like Usman does. So very, very interesting. And yeah, I was more interested in this guy. I actually thought that the other guy, Tanzalovi, could have a career in the UFC also. I kind of wanted to see what Dana's thoughts were on him. I hope that somebody asks it. I didn't yet watch the post-fight press conference from Dana, which I'm going to do shortly, but I thought Tanzalovi was pretty good. He had fast kicks, but he knew that he could get knocked out, so he had to fight a certain way in order to get the victory, and I thought that he did get the victory, but the judges didn't give it to him, so they basically completely muted the night of Tanzalovi, and now you have this interesting prospect, Musasa, and it's like, well, hey, he comes to the United States, and this is what Dana said. If he trains with the right guys, this guy has a lot of potential, and I really agreed with that. So I was actually happy with Dana's decision, and it made a lot of sense to me. Then you had Belgari, Yusri Belgari, or Belgarwi, a guy who fought both Alex Pereira and Israel Adesanya in kickboxing. I think he has victories, even maybe over one or both of them, and he had close fights with them. And then he's training with Pereira, and this is his second time on the Contender. I remember he fought last time, and it was a pretty boring fight, and he lost it. And I didn't understand his approach last time because he was standing not as straight up tall as you would expect a guy his size. He was kind of a little bit more crouched, limiting the reach advantage that he has, and then he didn't go for it, and he blamed it on Lyme disease. And then he basically did the same thing tonight. He actually did end up getting the finish eventually halfway through the third round, but the guy he was fighting against was just like, who made this fight? Who did the matchmaking here? This was pretty poor matchmaking, if I had to say. He fought a guy named Taiga Iwasaki, and the guy, tried to bring the fight, but he was severely outmatched just in terms of size. It really made no sense. And the whole fight, I'm just waiting for Belgawi to knock him out. I'm saying, just throw the 1-2, you'll knock him out. Just throw kicks, you'll knock him out. You can do really anything you want, and you can knock this guy out. And that was basically what happened. Is he was basically forced to knock the guy out eventually, but he could have won the fight in the first round. He could have won the fight in the second round. He ended up winning the fight in the third round. And Dana came out and he's like, look, you poked your opponent in the eye 5 or 6 times. I don't think it was 5 or 6. I think it was 3 times that he poked him in the eye, because I think it was once, then the second time it was a warning, and then the third time they took away a point. So I think he actually poked Iwasaki in the eye 3 times, and then he eventually won the fight with Iwasaki just pressuring to try and get a knockout for himself, and he won the fight. He got the knee, but it was very unimpressive, despite the fact that he got the finish, and Dana didn't give him the contract. So Dana and I were like in full agreement on the first 3 fights, and then in the fourth fight, he was, it was obvious as well. You had this guy, Navajo Sterling. He came out in the first round, and he was fighting a very tough guy, Philip Latu. The guy didn't look like to be in premier shape, but he had very good head movement, and he had a lot of power on his punches. I think that Latu could actually go and beat a lot of guys on the Contender and potentially get into the UFC if he had the right matchmaking. But here he was fighting against... he's a 33-year-old, so he's getting a little old in the tooth. And you have Navajo Sterling, the ultimate prospect, coming in from Israel Adesanya's camp. In the promos, you have a little snippet from Dan Hooker, Israel Adesanya, and Kai Kara France. So you see that he's in really good company training with Eugene Behrman there, and he's the champion of light heavyweight, and sounds like he also could fight at heavyweight for this promotion out there in New Zealand. And in the first round, he actually got caught once or twice. Latu looked really good. He came with a good story of standing up and defending himself in some pretty bad situations. And he seemed to be a really good, tough, prove-it fight. I think the problem for Latu was he got tired after the first round. He started to get tired near the end of the first round. And in the second round, he didn't quite have that same... Without that full gas tank, Sterling was able to... not be in any real danger, and he was able to knock him out. And still, you could even see on the finishing punch, Sterling was very cognizant of the punches coming back his way. I don't even think that Navajo Sterling landed the left hook with complete and full power. I think he could have actually done it even more powerfully if he wasn't so worried about the shots coming back at him, but it didn't matter. It was enough to basically knock him unconscious. Latu wasn't totally unconscious. He was enough that he could not defend himself at all, and his hands were just like flailing in the air. But he wasn't 100% out, but it was close enough to being completely unconscious that the fight was over. And Navajo Sterling, very impressive, because he came in there. He was a heavy favorite. He was supposed to get the victory. First round, he didn't get the knockout. And then second round, he just came in and got the knockout very decisively with really... No, I guess there was some danger coming his way in the first round, but he did exactly what he had to do, and it's hard to do that sometimes. Like we saw from Belgawi. Belgawi was supposed to get the win, and eventually he did get the win, but it was so unimpressive in the way that he did it that he didn't get the contract. And Navajo Sterling was the flip side. He was supposed to get the win. He came in, got the win pretty quickly, early in round 2, and it was emphatic. And he showed why he's such a hot prospect. So there you have it. I really agreed with Dana White's opinions on this one. The only questionable contract, I think, to me, is really Cagliari, the first girl who won by armbar, because it looked like her opponent didn't belong in there. And that makes me question if she belonged in there. and she just took advantage of a very simple position. She was on the bottom, so she wasn't in a great position, but she just took advantage. The other girl, Laframboise, left her arms out, and she just took the arm bar. Then it looked like she even had time to adjust it. It just looked like she beat a really low-level opponent, and she somehow got that fight on the Contender Series, so she's in the UFC. She's the one who I would say is the most worrisome, but hey, the women's divisions aren't as strong. So if she has a chance in the UFC and she can capitalize on it and get ready and get better, hey, she has the opportunity right there. And now let's shift the focus a little bit. I'm pretty excited for UFC at the Sphere. I know a lot of people are hating on it. I don't really care. It doesn't bother me whatsoever. I'm curious to see what it's going to look like. I'm not going to the Sphere. I'm not paying that kind of money, but if I was super rich, I probably would. I think it's going to be super cool, and Dana keeps saying just watch before you critique it. So I'm really excited. I'm going to be watching 100% for all of the between fight stuff happening at the Sphere. I think it's going to be a really fun, interesting, and if it falls flat, that'll be interesting too. Regardless of what happens here, we're going to have a lot to talk about. We have the Sugar Show. Now, I didn't do what I typically do, going a deep dive into every single fight that this guy has had, but Sean O'Malley, we know what he's all about. He's got the striking. Nobody seems to be able to take him down for the last several fights in a meaningful way. He disposed of all of the top competition. He knocked out Aljo pretty emphatically, pretty easily. Aljo never took him down, never really got close. He beat Peter Yan, showed that he could go the distance in a 3-round fight and get the victory over a very tough guy, a former champion. He beat Cheeto. He went 5 rounds against a guy who's virtually unbreakable, and O'Malley may have actually broken him, as we saw after that fight. Cheeto, didn't look the same when he fought Figueiredo, so Cheeto took a lot of damage there. O'Malley, probably the best switch fighter, fighting from both stances. He has very good jiu-jitsu that he's been working on. He's good takedown defense. He's going against Merab. Merab is the kind of guy where you know what he's going to do coming in. You know he's going to try for the takedown, and where other guys who have good wrestling games will maybe go into a fight and struggle to get the takedown, Merab is just going to go for it. He's just going to go for it. He does it against everybody. But, he wasn't really able to take down Jose Aldo and keep him there, so I think O'Malley is even better, even younger, better striker than Aldo, better from both stances than Aldo. He's just the best. I think he's going to knock Merab out. That's really the way I see this fight going. I see O'Malley getting the emphatic victory and really cementing himself as one of the best in the history of bantamweight, one of the best in the UFC currently. This is really the cementing fight for me, for Sean O'Malley. This is it. I mean, he already cemented himself as a guy who you thought he was brittle. You thought he wasn't necessarily going to make it to the top, and it was just more like a Paddy Pimblett star power. And you're like, okay, well, eventually he's going to lose. And really, he kind of proved everyone wrong. He's not brittle. He showed that he has the grit to go full 3 rounds, full 5 rounds, batter someone senseless, to go the distance. If someone presents an opportunity for a knockout, he can get the crazy knockout. He's shown that on the way up. He showed that against Aljo, and now he's going to do it to Aljo's teammate. That's the way I see this one going. Then you have Grasso versus Shevchenko. Grasso won the first one. Shevchenko then split decision. I thought Grasso won it. Shevchenko then says, I clearly won the fight. It's like, okay, Valentina, you've done this act several times. You're a very pathetic loser. Like, you're a real sore loser. You lost the fights to Nunes. You said the same excuses. You lost the fight to Grasso. You said the same excuses. You made it sound like you were robbed. You weren't robbed every time. Okay, so maybe for all of your fancy techniques and your great counter-striking, maybe you're just not as amazing as you think you are. Maybe you actually lost a couple of fights. And I hope Grasso wins, because I would like to be done with the Valentina Shevchenko era. I'd like to see someone new. I'd like for Grasso to get it done. I think Grasso has the better boxing, and Grasso a little bit confuses me as well, because I thought her reaction to keeping her belt in a tie, in a draw, was very strange. She didn't seem to be too upset with it. It was nobody really wants a draw. She was acting like she won, and then Daniel Cormier had the funny, but it was a draw though. So I don't really care about the fight too much, if I'm being honest. I don't know who a great contender is coming up after them. I would like to see someone just storm in like a Sugar Sean into the women's divisions and just start lighting things up and changing things. So that's what I'm really looking forward to, hopefully sometime soon from the women's division. I'm looking for the next Rousey. Someone's just come up and make a lot of noise. Then you have Ortega going against Lopez. I think Ortega's going to get the win. I don't think Lopez is really on that level. I think Ortega's a top level guy, and he's always going to be there. He fights very infrequently, but I think he's going to be at the top level for the duration of his career until he stops fighting. Then you have Zellhuber versus Ribovics. I don't know anything about Ribovics. Then you have Zellhuber is pretty good. Ronaldo Rodriguez against Ode Osborne. I don't think Ode Osborne is necessarily even UFC material. Then we go on to Aldana versus Dumont. It should be an okay fight. Manuel Torres versus Bahamondes. Ignacio Bahamondes, very good striker. Hopefully we'll see a knockout there. Go down the rest of the fight card. Doesn't seem like there's anything too much except for the Raul Rosas Jr. We're all looking for Raul Rosas Jr. to go out and represent. I'm sure they matched him up pretty well because he's a young guy and he's going out and it's Noche UFC and they want him to get the victory. So we should see a nice grappling victory for Raul Rosas, maybe by ground and pound, maybe by submission if his opponent is able to last long enough. This is the Straight Up Fight Network.